Ladies and gentlemen, today is April 13th, 2026. Welcome to Uncle Joe's Yuhua Show. Let me tell you, at 10 o'clock this morning Eastern Time, the United States Navy officially began a maritime blockade of every single Iranian port. On Truth Social, President Trump did not pull any punches. 158 Iranian Navy ships are already, in his words, lying on the bottom of the sea, and any remaining fast attack boat that dares come near the blockade line will be, quote, immediately eliminated. The Strait of Hormuz, the strategic hub that normally carries about one-fifth of the world's crude oil flow, turned overnight into a brand new keg of gunpowder. Brent crude is pushing up toward $100 a barrel. Indexes in London, Tokyo, and Seoul all slid in response. Iranian President Pezeshkian warned that threatening Hormuz will trigger chain reaction consequences for the entire world. A scene like this reminds me of an ancient Greek king from the Roman Republic era, Pyrrhus of Epirus. He once thrashed the Romans on the battlefield, and he did it beautifully. But after the smoke cleared, surveying the carnage, he turned to his officers and said a line that is not quoted all that often today. If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined. Win one more, and I am finished. That is exactly where the phrase a Pyrrhic victory was born. A naval blockade of the strait can squeeze Tehran in the short run, but in the long run, oil prices, inflation, the confidence of your allies, every one of those is a tab that someone eventually has to pay. Win every battle and lose the treasury. Is it not? On the very same day, the White House released the 2026 economic report of the president. The Council of Economic Advisors was beating its chest hard. Inflation is holding near the Federal Reserve target. Real gross domestic product is projected to grow at roughly 3% this year. New trade frameworks with the European Union, Japan, South Korea, the United Kingdom, India, and Taiwan are all now in place. And, this is the headline, the United States has pulled in more than $2.7 trillion of investment in artificial intelligence and technology alone, locking in the top spot on the global AI leaderboard. These are hard numbers on the bright side of the ledger. Using tariffs as a negotiating lever has, in fact, brought a measurable slice of manufacturing back home. On that same Monday, Trump also threatened a 50% tariff on China over suspicions that Beijing may be quietly shipping weapons to Tehran. Maximum pressure, that signature move of his, some clap, some shake their heads. Let me tell you, in chapter 57 of the Tao Te Ching, Laozi left behind a line that rarely makes it onto modern lips. Govern a country by what is upright, deploy an army by what is unexpected, and truly win the world only by doing nothing troublesome. Read that out loud in the Situation Room of the Oval Office tonight and tell me it does not land exactly like a memo drafted yesterday. There was a political earthquake in Central Europe. In Sunday's general election in Hungary, Peter Magyar's TISA party defeated Viktor Orban, a man who had governed the country for more than a decade, by an overwhelming margin. Orban himself, once the self-styled spokesman for a liberal democracy, bowed his head at the ballot box and admitted in his own words that the result was painful but clear. Another striking headline came out of Rome. Pope Leo XIV departed today for Algiers, beginning an 11-day apostolic journey through 4 African nations. Before boarding, the first American-born pontiff responded to President Trump's weekend charge that he is too liberal and weak on crime. Leo XIV kept it diplomatic. I don't want to get into a debate with him, but the message of the gospel should not be abused the way certain people are abusing it. Throne versus altar. A scene like this tosses us straight back to Christmas Day in the year 800. On that day, in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Charlemagne was personally crowned Emperor of the Romans by another pope named Leo III. But Charlemagne's own court scholar, Alcuin of York, had already written privately to his emperor, leaving behind a warning that hardly anyone cites today. Do not listen to those who keep saying the voice of the people is the voice of God, because the roar of the crowd is always very close to madness. A private court memo 1,200 years old, and it still fits the Oval Office today like a tailored suit. Some coincidence, is it not? Over in South America, Peru was forced to extend its Sunday presidential election by a full day after ballots failed to reach polling stations on time. In northern Haiti, a stampede at a mountaintop fortress killed at least 25 people. Even more heartbreaking, the Nigerian Air Force, in an airstrike aimed at militants, mistakenly hit a local market, and Amnesty International has now confirmed at least 100 innocent civilians were killed. The world on this one Monday has been moving like ants on a hot plate. There was, however, one softer little moment worth a smile. Sharon Simmons, a DoorDash driver out of the state of Arkansas, delivered 2 bags of McDonald's to the Oval Office this afternoon. Trump walked out in person, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, handed it to her as a tip, and joked that the whole scene did not look staged at all. The internet lit up with laughter. For this one moment at least, the American thermometer still had a little warmth on it. Now let's turn to artificial intelligence. Stanford University's Institute for Human-Centered AI released its 2026 AI Index report today. The United States and China are now running almost neck and neck at the top of global model performance, and the flagship model from Anthropic currently holds the global #1 spot, but its lead has narrowed all the way down to 2.7%. What really made me smile, though, was this. NASA's Perseverance rover on Mars has, for the first time ever, used Anthropic's Claude Vision language model to analyze orbital terrain imagery and autonomously plan its own safe driving waypoints. Down here on Earth, human beings are still arguing themselves hoarse over a single straight. Up there on Mars, the machine is already deciding for itself which way to roll. Let that contrast sit with you for a moment. Learning from the old in order to see the new, here is one more story, this one out of the Ming Dynasty. In the year 1449, at the disastrous Battle of Tumu Bao, the young Ming emperor was captured by Mongol forces. Panic swept through the capital, and much of the court pushed to move the government south. The vice minister of war, Yu Qian, cut the whole debate off with a single sentence. Anyone who proposes moving south deserves to be beheaded. The altars of state come first, the ruler comes second. He personally anchored the defense of Beijing, held all 9 of its gates, and single-handedly preserved half of the Ming Empire. But Yu Qian also left behind a much quieter line about his own calling. As long as all living souls are fed and warmed, I will not mind the hardship of walking out of the mountains to shoulder this burden. That is what real public service backbone actually looks like. Washington, Tehran, Jerusalem. How many politicians today can actually put the altars of state ahead of their own personal ledger? One last, even older story. The Shiji records that Da Yu spent 13 years taming the Great Flood, and on 3 separate occasions he passed right by his own front door without once stepping inside. His father, Gun, had tried to stop the waters by building dikes. 9 solid years of blocking, and the flood only got worse. Da Yu switched strategy entirely. He dredged the 9 rivers, channeled the water out to the sea, and the realm finally found peace. Block versus channel. That lesson was already on the exam 4,000 years ago. Today, the American fleet is blocking Iran's ports in the Strait of Hormuz. It can stop the traffic for a while. It cannot stop the direction in which the world's energy wants to flow. The ledger of history has never been a closed book. Somebody asked me the other day, is there really nothing new under the sun? Does history just keep repeating itself? My answer is this. It is not the events that repeat, it is human nature. The bill for arrogance was first picked up by Pyrrhus on the battlefield 2,300 years ago, and it is still being picked up at the negotiation table today. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings today's Uncle Joe's Yuhua Show to a close. No matter which direction the price of crude oil decides to fly next, holding on to a clear head is still the most expensive thing you can own. 我们下次见.